Okay, postmodernism. That's a term not real familiar to a lot of people. It came along in the late 20th century, and because some leaders said old ways don't work, the message of the gospel doesn't work for today's generation, let's say the under 45 generation, old-fashioned methods of preaching, teaching, and a lot of other theology is simply outdated. That's what they're saying. So this crowd decided to make up their own rules, but you say they are putting eternity at risk for those who follow them. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you understand what postmodernism is, and you hear people refer to it, and I've called it this myself, and then of course immediately have to define it. But when you say postmodern Christianity, you say, well, those are mutually exclusive, because postmodernism claims there are no absolutes, that whatever a person believes is truth or right or wrong is up to them, and that anybody who says there's absolutes is a Neanderthal and looking at things from a different prism that we shouldn't see today. One of the most important things is seeing that postmodernism is the way our kids are being educated in the educational community in America and around the world. Our kids are coming out, and the polls show us this. The Pew polls have said to us, the generation that's out there now, the millennial generation, doesn't have an anchor in truth, doesn't believe that they can trust the history of the past. They're looking at everything differently and really rearranging things from what reality actually is.
Okay, now you do make a case for the, let's call it the end time church, because that's what the Bible calls it, certain characteristics that are going to be a part of the last days church. And it's not going to be characterized necessarily by a revival. For sure, it will be characterized by a lot of apostasy, and it'll have a form of godliness, but at the root, it's all about, we talk about this often here, it's all about me, myself, and I in the last days church. What else do you feel characterizes that? Because that's what's allowing this to happen.
Let me respond or say something about what you just said that I think is so important, and we don't want to miss this. Worship of God is what the church should be all about. We are in the church and a part of it because we want to adore Him, worship Him, and we want to then, of course, extend that message to the lost around us in the world. What is happening inside the postmodern church, and this is happening, my friends, at the heart of evangelicalism, is that now the church isn't about God anymore. It's about what we get out of it. So we have transposed worship of God to making the church about us. When you said meism, or it's about I, and, we could go on and talk about how many times we hear those kind of messages, the life application messages that are now replete around us. Nothing wrong with some of those, that's for sure. We're not saying that's all wrong. But the preaching of doctrine, the preaching of the scriptures, just hanging on to the Bible as the truth of God, those things are not just beginning, they're in the midst of fading away from sight inside of our churches.
Well, you and I often talk, and you have a teaching about it, Eric. You call it the most dangerous cult, but we often talk about the mainline denominations who kind of went off the tracks 150 years ago, and as a result, there are very few mainline outfits today who are very solid. And today, you and I have watched, and we're going to give some examples here in just a few minutes, but we've watched evangelicalism start to do the very same thing, kind of the essence of this 2-disc DVD, The New Truly Confused Evangelicals, correct?
Well, that's correct, Jan. And that's the thing. This is a satanic redo, and I've called it that now for several years, that we're watching and experiencing the very same thing that took down the once sound and once very saved mainline churches 150 years ago. They were the evangelicals of their day, and I've said that on our air more than one occasion. But I don't think that can be said enough for the church to recognize that this is nothing new. This is the same way Satan destroyed the church in those days, and we can see around us the blight upon the landscape of Christianity, or that which claims to be Christianity, in the mainline churches, where it's really hard to find a church really preaching the gospel in many of those denominations. But they were who we have claimed to be.